Well, good morning, everybody. This is Celeste Carmichael. I am working with the Cooperative Extension Administration and Organizational Development and Accountability. And you are joining our Campus County Connection webinar series. This is the first in our series for this year. We're very happy to be presenting today on the GAPS program, an update on produce safety, and we have some very special guests. Betsy Ben, Gretchen Wall, Stephanie Mellenbacher are all going to be here with us today and explaining a little bit about this program and how it both connects both research and extension and how they complement each other in this program. So if you're just joining us for the first time for a Campus County Connection webinar, the intent of this series is really just to build some peripheral knowledge about some really great extension and research projects that are working together in a very integrated way across our systems. So with that, I just want to say welcome, and I am going to ask, I think Gretchen is the first one that's on. And as you come on, Gretchen and Stephanie and Betsy, please do give an introduction to our group about yourself so they know a little bit about you.
Thanks very much, Celeste. We really appreciate the opportunity to present. Just so everyone out there knows, my name is Betsy Ben. I'm a Senior Extension Associate in the Department of Food Science and the National GAPS Program Coordinator, as well as the Director of the Produce Safety Alliance. Joining me today on the call are Gretchen Wall and Stephanie Mellenbacher, as you mentioned. Gretchen Wall is an Extension Specialist in Food Science and the Produce Safety Alliance Coordinator. She has a BS in Food Science from Penn State, an MS from Colorado State University in an interdisciplinary food science and food safety program. She's going to be giving you an update on the FSMA proposed produce safety rule and an overview of how the Produce Safety Alliance is here as a resource. If we can move this slide ahead one, you'll see the agenda. The other speaker to join us is Stephanie Mellenbacher, and she'll be talking about produce safety training going on in New York State for fruit and vegetable farmers. Stephanie has a BS in plant sciences from Cornell and has been working as a horticulture community educator since 2007. She has experience also working with the Steuben County Soil and Water District as well as the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. So we're very fortunate to have both Gretchen and Stephanie on the call. Lastly, I'll be talking about a decision tree project that we're working on to help growers assess their risk and prioritize where to spend limited resources to get the most produce safety risk reduction for their investment. So we have an hour, and I'll quit talking so we can jump right to the presentation. There will be questions that go along after each presentation, and if you do have questions, please do type the questions in the box for the presenters so that we can address them during our presentations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Betsy and Celeste. This is Gretchen, and I'm going to try to give you a very brief overview of the Food Safety Modernization Act and specifically the proposed produce safety rule. I think that's a big task given that I have 15 minutes. So what I'm really going to try to do is share some resources with you through the chat box so that you have those links. I was hoping to implant them into these slides, but I think the best way is for me to share some of those links to resources with you in the chat box. So if you keep your eye on that, it'll link you to some great educational resources that go along with my presentation. But the Food Safety Modernization Act, the draft was released on January 4th of this past year. And the produce safety regulation is just one of 6 major preventive controls areas that is included within the Food Safety Modernization Act. And its specific focus is on growing, harvesting, post-harvest handling of fresh produce. And the whole premise is that its focus is on prevention and not the detection of issues. Now that I say I'm just going to focus on the produce safety rule, I wanted to bring this to your attention because I have a feeling that a lot of you work with fresh produce growers who might not be aware that they actually fall under potentially under 2 of the rules that are proposed in FSMA. So the second rule that is proposed is called the Preventive Controls Rule, and that has a focus on the manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding of human food. And the reason why I bring this to your attention is we have a lot of farms that do specific things on their farms, such as packing produce from other farms or holding produce from another farm, that actually push them into a preventive controls rule. And that requires a written plan to identify food safety hazards. So the preventive controls rule is slightly different than the produce rule because the produce is focused at the farm level, but there is some crossover. And there is an FDA resource that I think is really helpful that they put out. It's called I Have a Farm, Does the Proposed Preventive Controls Rule Affect Me? Let's see if I can share that in the chat box. But there is a great PDF that they put out that sort of explains what sort of actions that you're doing on the farm might cause you to cross over into the second rule. That all being said, I'm not going to talk much about the Preventive Controls Rule at all. There is another alliance called the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance that has a great website, and you can find more information about that rule from their website. So the produce rule, back to the produce rule. The main areas of focus are agricultural water, biological soil amendments would be manure, compost, domesticated and wild animals, personnel qualifications and health and hygiene, and then equipment, tools, buildings, and sanitation. And those are the primary areas of focus of this regulation. A while back, the Produce Safety Alliance did a series of webinars, and let me get the link for you here. We did a series of Q&A sessions with the FDA that addressed each one of these specific areas, and they were just open-ended. Anybody could ask any questions about any one of these topics. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to those sessions yet, they were recorded and they are available on the website. I just shared that link with you in the chat box. But I think that's a great starting point if you don't have time to read and you want to get up to speed on some of the major issues on each one of these topics. I do want to give you a brief overview of what would be considered in scope and out of scope of the produce rule, because there is often some confusion about this. Things that would be in scope of the produce rule would be fresh fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, mushrooms, sprouts. There's this middle category that's sort of interesting. They're considering this to be in scope but exempt, meaning that these produce items are typically not eaten raw, like potatoes or artichokes, meaning that they'll have some sort of cooking step or kill step that would potentially eliminate a pathogen that would be on that produce. So they're still in scope, but they would be exempt of the produce rule. And then things that are totally out of scope of the rule would be agronomic crops or items that are going to a further processing step, such as tomato paste, Roma tomatoes that are going to a tomato paste plant, which would likely have a HACCP plan, and you wouldn't be likely to have a pathogen in the final product because of the processing steps taken. Now, there are some proposed exemptions to this rule. As I mentioned already, the produce that is rarely consumed raw, they've created a whole list. I'm not sure that it's quite exhaustive, but they've pulled it from data about how people typically prepare foods. So produce items that are rarely consumed raw would be exempt. The produce destined for kill step processing, like the Roma tomatoes that are going to a canning process. Produce for personal or on-farm consumption would also be exempt. And then this one about if your farm makes less than $25,000 in all food sales over an average of 3 years, then you would be exempt from the rule. There's another good resource specifically about the exemptions, and let me get that link for you here, that walks you through whether you might be exempt or whether you might, whether the produce safety rule might apply to you. So furthermore, there's some more exemptions, and this one's a little bit tougher to comprehend. So there's basically two pieces to it. One is that farms might be exempt if they have average annual monetary value of all foods sold in the previous 3 years that is less than $500,000. And they sell to a qualified end user. And what they're considering a qualified end user would be direct to consumer, or a restaurant or retail food establishment that's within the same state or within 275 miles of where that produce was grown. So it's an and. You have to be less than $500,000 of food sold, and you have to sell to a qualified end user. That all being said, there are a lot of small farms that will likely be exempt from this regulation, but that does not mean that they'll be exempt from the marketplace. We're starting to see a lot of GAPS programs and GAPS audits being required, even at the smallest market venues, from farm-to-school programs to farmers markets. It is largely buyer-driven at this point. So even if these farms are exempt from the regulation, the trend, as we've seen so far, is for buyers to continue to require their suppliers to have food safety plans or GAPS audits or have some sort of food safety protocols in place on their farm. The big thing that I want everybody on the call to recognize is that this is a proposed rule, which means that you have the opportunity to comment on the rule and make your voice heard now. The comment period has been extended multiple times, but this is the final time. That's what we've been told, is that the comment period is officially closing on November 16th of this year. And we really encourage you to get active in the comment process. And they're looking for comments that contain real examples and data that will support your position, because that will make the most impact and they can really act on those comments. And we encourage you, if you're working with farmers, to remind them to submit their comments or get growers together to submit comments in groups. And I actually just checked the website this morning. I'll give you guys the link here that will take you directly to the comment website. But even with the government closures, you can still comment, so there's no excuses. There's just a little banner at the top of the website that says some of the data online might not be up to date, but rest assured, you can still submit your comments while the government's not working. But I just entered in the link there that will take you to the comment page. And I can't tell you enough that they really are trying their best to address, and they have to address, every comment that is submitted to that docket. So please encourage your growers to comment, and you yourself can comment on that produce safety rule. Here's some more resources from the FDA. They have this website called the Farmer's Toolkit, and the toolkit has a lot of different fact sheets on it, but they're all specific to growers, and I'll share that link with you as well. But I think it's a good website to direct some of the farmers that you're working with to, because it's sort of a one-stop shop for all of the educational resources that they've developed. The other thing I briefly want to talk about is the Produce Safety Alliance. It is a program here at Cornell, and it's a cooperative agreement between Cornell, the FDA, and the USDA. And what we're doing is really just focusing on outreach and education to assist farmers in meeting this regulatory requirement and market food safety requirements. And Betsy and I have been working on that project for 2.5 years now, and we're still going strong, and we're working on the curriculum modules. I really encourage you to visit our website at some point if you haven't been to or don't know much about the Produce Safety Alliance. It has a lot of great resources on it, including a link to sign up for our general listserv. Our listserv, we really try not to spam it. We usually only send out maybe 1 email a month, or emails that are pertinent to things that are going on with the FDA regulatory status. But there is a link on our website to sign up for the general PSA listserv. As extension educators, I think you all should know about a separate group that we have. We call it the Produce Safety Educators Group, and right now we're meeting once a month, actually on WebEx, to talk about issues related to produce safety and education all over the country. We've got educators from nearly every state represented, and those have been really productive calls. So if you want to join that group, send an email to me, which is glw53@cornell.edu, to join that group. We're really trying to keep it to produce safety educators and extension educators only, so you won't find a link on the website for that. The PSA FDA Q&A series, that was the first or second link that I shared with you. They're real questions from farmers and extension specialists and direct answers from the FDA. So if you have a chance, definitely listen to those recordings. And then we've got lots of resources, university contacts from nearly every state, and many more resources on the website. So there's the website. I also, if you're tech savvy or social media savvy, we have a Facebook page now. So if you prefer to get your little bites of information through social media, definitely like us on Facebook. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take some in the chat box, or I'm not sure, Celeste, how you'd like to do questions or save them for the end.
I think that, you know, if folks have questions and you want to include that in the chat box now. One of the questions was, can we get a copy of slides? A couple of people asked about that. And yes, if it's okay with Betsy and Stephanie and Gretchen, my plan is, you know, typically we will post any slides or resources that are shared, you know, during the Campus County Connection webinars. Is that all right with you guys?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. You know, a couple things that I'll just mention as we're in between here is we're talking about, you know, this is all fantastic food safety opportunities for food safety programming. And, you know, I'll just mention, some of you know that we're working on reporting right now. This is kind of reporting season for Cornell Cooperative Extension and for Smith-Lever funding. So if you have some federal formula funds that you've received, you received that funding reporting request recently. And food safety is one of the major initiatives within our plan of work that we're reporting on. So there's many outcomes within the reporting series, and you know, as you're planning your program locally that you might want to look at and connect to, that's in the Cooperative Extension Plan of Work, which connects to all of the goals of NIFA. So this ties very, very nicely with, you know, with both planning and considering local plans and how that fits in with the scope of our Cornell Cooperative Extension Plan. And if you have thought about, you know, what am I doing related to food safety, or how does that fit with our plan of work and what NIFA wants, this is just a, you know, a perfect connection. So I want to mention that. I'll also mention, and I see your note here, Betsy, to put up the first poll question. So I'm going to open that first poll question. And while you're answering that, just make note that, you know, I sent out my original note with the link to this webinar, that this is the first time that we're using the event capacity of WebEx. So were a few, I won't really call them glitches, but little hiccups that as we were getting started. I apologize if you were trying to hear and couldn't hear anything. I think we've worked that out. Teleconference just did not work, and probably it was something that I needed to call in on the teleconference also for you to be able to hear that way, but we didn't realize that. So I apologize, and just know that we're trying to work out these the technology and understand it better to bring you the best resources that we can in this way. So that's all I have to share.
And I know that was a really fast and furious presentation of the produce safety rule. I'm happy to answer any questions, so I just put our contact information up there for both Betsy and I. If you have any more specific questions about the produce safety rule or how to comment on the proposed rule, please don't hesitate to contact either one of us.
Thank you, Gretchen. And so are we moving on to Stephanie next? Is that right? Or
Yes.
we're gonna we should probably finish up the polling. Looks like there's a few folks that haven't participated in the poll yet, so we got a couple more moments here. Looks like they usually give you 5 minutes for the polls, but I bet we can process through that a little bit quicker. There we go.
Okay. Are you ready to go then?
Sure, I'm going to close the poll.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a couple of seconds to then show the responses.
Okay. You all set, or?
It's still closing. There we go. Okay, there we go. Everybody should be able to see the responses at this point.
I am interested a large proportion of the group does not seem to plan to submit any comments. I'm interested if you'd like to share why. You can send a private message if you don't want to share it with the group, but a large proportion. It's interesting.
Well, and you have to remember, too, that as a Campus County Connection webinar, there may be people listening in that just kind of getting the feeling for what it is that you have going on, but maybe they're not, their program may not be specifically connected. So that might be part of the reason as well.
Yep.
All right. So am I moving the ball down to Stephanie at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Betsy and Gretchen asked me to participate in this webinar because I'm a county extension educator, but I've also helped them with some produce safety training. So they really wanted that point of view to be added to this this discussion. And so I'll be going through a little bit of how to set up training, but I wanted to really hit home why I got involved. So I'm a horticulture community educator, and in my county, I work a lot with fruit and vegetable producers, as well as some of the region, a lot of high tunnel growers, but I also have field crops responsibilities as well as home grounds and gardens. But this was something that really interested me, for one, and the region kind of came together over in our area, and we kind of collectively started doing trainings in the region. But for my position, why would I get involved? So we've just heard about the proposed legislation about that the producers are going to be faced with. So I thought it would be really important for me to understand that so I could help them muddle their way through that. And I'm sure I still don't understand it completely, but I'm thankful to have Betsy and Gretchen to refer to. And the other reason I got involved is part of our role as an extension educator is to improve the economic viability of New York State producers, not only through production practices, but any way we possibly can. And yes, there's a huge rule coming down that's going to be, the producers are going to be faced with, but it hasn't really changed the way the producers are viewing it, and at least in my area, market is driving most of the producers to follow the regulations. So I've viewed the food safety plan as a tool to actually open up new markets for the producers. And most of our producers here in Steuben County are quite small, and we're in a rural area, so our markets are limited. So I've really viewed it in a positive way for some of the small growers to actually have new markets available to them. So what I wanted to discuss was how to set this type of training up and why to do that. So growers needed a training that improved their knowledge and resulted in a written farm food safety plan. And this originally came from kind of the pressures of the markets. So they came, a lot of producers came to me, and of course Betsy and Gretchen, and needed help with that. So I needed to learn about it first. And all farmers are different, and I'm sure everybody out there is quite aware of, you know, size differences, you know, production differences. There's every producer is different, and you need to take an individual approach to that. So producing a functional template is a little bit difficult. So working one-on-one is really where you have to go, but the trainings really help with that. And there was also a need to create a template, but growers needed to have a food safety understanding of food safety so that they could actually write their own plan. So the current training format is actually 3 days. Day one, we present some PowerPoints typically and provide foundational information and help them guide their own individual situation through the risk assessment. So we're giving them a lot of background information. You know, we've talked about information about what type of crops have had what diseases, so case studies. We usually go through the cantaloupe discussion so that it's really hit home. We go through water testing, all of that sort of information through day one. And the participants pretty much listen, but it's more of a discussion than, you know, you're just presenting at them. And it does provide a time for the participants to present. I work with a lot of potato growers, and they fall into that kind of middle category of in scope but exempt. So they're kind of wondering why they need to do it. And again, I just try to hit home. It's not necessarily the rule that's forcing you to do this, or that may be forcing you to do it. It's opportunity in markets. So that's what I try to hit home with them. And we do try to bring in a farmer that's gone through the process, or at least has gone through past workshops to present during this, because learning from peers is really important, and understanding the situation, how they've gone through the process is really important. And it contains a lot of real farm examples. Like I said, the cantaloupe discussion, spinach, we really try to hit home what could potentially happen. And it really does form a discussion rather than us just preaching to them. On day two, I feel like day two is pretty intense, actually. Everyone brings a laptop and is provided with a jump drive with a template and all of the food safety plan and resources on it. And we do have some loaners if participants don't have that access. But this is when the participants actually begin to write their own food safety plan and individualize the information they learned on day one to fit what they're doing on their farm. Not everybody has a processing or packing facility, so you may not be writing a plan for that. But this is where it helps to have several presenters or hosts in the room to help answer questions and work individually. But it can work, you find a way to work through that. So you go through we go through all of the resources together in the beginning of the day, and then the group is let loose to start working on their individual plans. And really we're working quite individually that day with each participant. It's important for growers to bring maps and other information relevant to their own individual food safety plan that day. And day three, this is I think one of the more interesting aspects of the training. It's more of day three is a mock audit. It may not be it's not going to be during or congruent with day 1 and day 2. It's actually because day 1 and day 2 are usually during off season. Day 3 has to be during the growing or harvest season because we want to actually see the process on whichever farm is chosen. And this is, I think, one of the most important parts is that New York State Ag and Markets auditors are there going through the process in front of all the participants. So this is the one chance you get to speak to them, hear what they would have chosen or what their opinion of the situation would be, to get a really clear understanding of how the process works. But one interesting thing is you're not allowed to attend day 3 without going through days 1 and 2. You really need to have a good understanding of the food safety plan and how it would fit on your farm before you wouldn't even know what questions to ask really if you went to day 3 without going to day 1 and 2. So that's really important. As an educator, there's some considerations in planning these type of trainings that you want to keep in mind. Plan for off season. We all know that you're not going to get growers out during growing season or harvest especially. Collaboration is critical. We typically bring in a lot of, well, Betsy's usually there or somebody from the food safety team, Gretchen, so campus, and we try to bring in New York State Ag and Markets auditors, so they're on day 1 and 2, hopefully, to answer some questions that you might have. And then the county hosts are really important because it gets quite intense. So you want to have enough food and drink available and enough breaks so that people can take a break and just kind of sort through the information that we're throwing at them. And it's really important to get growers to participate. You don't want them to not ask questions because they're not engaged at that point, and you know they're not learning. You definitely want to have enough food and drink available for day 2. It is quite intense to be able to sort through the information and actually apply it to their own farm. And again, I just want to hit home that collaboration is really what makes this format work. Without New York State Ag and Markets, campus, that expertise of those doing this all the time, I wouldn't be able to get through it, I don't believe. I know we all have our own pocket or area of educators that we do. I know I am dealing mostly with production issues most of the time, and this is a little bit different than that, and I don't know all the microbiology and all of those, even with Gretchen's expertise, having the understanding of the rules is really, really crucial. And then, of course, we definitely need the growers to participate. So I just want to make sure I hit home that it's really important to have all this collaboration for it to really work. I think that's it for me, anyway. Are there any questions at this time?
If you do have a question, please do add it to the chat box. And I'm going to, this is the point that I'm going to open the next poll. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to open that up. And while you're responding to that poll, Stephanie, if I can ask you a couple questions, and you may have talked about this and I may have missed it, but when you hold these trainings, just some logistics. How many participants typically come? Are you measuring any of, like, do you follow up with them on outcomes to kind of figure out whether or not they were able to follow through on some of the information and some of the plans that they were writing?
Right. Yeah, we usually, well, in my experience, and Betsy and Gretchen have done a lot more than I have, but in the trainings that I've done, 10 to 15 participants. You don't want a large group because you will be working one-on-one. Sometimes 8 people show up, which is actually really nice because in the trainings that I've been involved in, it's been Betsy and Gretchen, and then maybe even Robert Haddad, or Craig Kelke, and myself, and one other educator. So there's quite a few presenters or hosts, which is nice because really on day 2, I really want to hit home that it is quite intense, and you're going to be answering a lot of questions, working very individually with each participant. I think we do have a chance to gather some outcomes. We do a polling process at the end of day 2, and they answer some questions. So we do get a lot of the required reporting statistics that we need. But I think on day 3, from the comments that I've seen, day 3 is where we hear, you know, if they're actually implementing what their food safety plan has been written for. So I think day 3 is really important. We get, you know, it gives us some time away from them after setting up the food safety plan with them to let them implement, and then we have a chance to check back with them at the mock audits if they've actually done anything, if they've had a chance to open up new markets for themselves, that sort of thing. And I believe that Betsy and Gretchen have a lot closer contact with growers about the outcomes than possibly I do.
Yeah, so Celeste, this is Betsy. We have been collecting data about how the program's going, how much of their plan are they getting written. We've been trying to follow up with who has gotten a audit or who hasn't. I have to give credit to Craig Kelke because he's normally chasing people down to ask that question. We're also beginning right now to look at economic impact of getting a plan, opening the market, and trying to drill down to more specifically. We have a new project going on with Todd Schmidt and Ag Econ and Elizabeth Newbold, who is working on some economic stuff. So these are all questions we're trying to begin to answer and take that data a little further.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have another question that's come in. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but the question is from Bernadette asking, what do you charge for trainings, or have you had grants to offset the cost of trainings?
Well, I can tell you a little bit of my experience. I'm part of the GVRMA group, so there's been some funding through that. So we've actually been able to have funding available, which has been extremely helpful. There is some money involved in the food. We do like to have a nice spread in the morning and then a really good lunch because it is 2 really long days. It's good information for them, and they like to stick around and ask questions as much as they can. But I actually am going to refer that to Betsy because I know down on Long Island they have had to raise their own funds or charge enough to cover the cost. So I'm going to refer that one to Betsy.
Right. So we have charged for the program. We have charged $100 for a grower to attend for 2 days. There's an additional fee of, I believe it's $20 if they bring a person on the 2nd day. We offer them that opportunity because many of the growers aren't very good at using a computer or typing. So on the 2nd day, they'll bring somebody from their operation or take their high school kid out of school and have them come along and help them type to write their plans. Having said that, the price of the course varies depending on the county and the kind of funding they get. So there's different individuals who can get funding sometimes for very specific groups, and so the price varies just to cover the cost, if that's helpful. So the answer is yes, we do charge. Yes, we have charged up to $100 for the 2-day course, charging extra for the extra people to cover food, as Stephanie mentioned, but there is not a set amount. It's just whatever needs to be done to cover the cost.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I shared the poll results, and we have in the chat box, and I'm not sure if if the rest of our presenters can see this, but I'll share it with you afterwards. They have a list of the counties that are interested in following up or may be interested in following up on potential training. So thank you, guys. All right. So I think I'm sharing the ball next with you, Betsy. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Here it comes.
Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is a project, a USDA-funded project that's been a collaboration between Cornell University, University of Minnesota, and the University of Tennessee. And this is to develop on-farm decision trees to help growers assess risk and prioritize the implementation of food safety practices. And what the objectives were are to really figure out how do we best help growers assess risk on their individual farms. Stephanie mentioned this, each farm is different, so it's very tough to say this is your biggest risk because it's going to be determined by the individual farm. So once you know what your risks are, or you're trying to figure out what your risks are, how do you prioritize your limited resources to address these risks? I have yet to meet a farm that says I have unlimited money, unlimited people, and unlimited time. So really, with the limited money, people, and time, how do you focus to get the biggest bang for your food safety dollar? We also are providing templates for standard operating procedures and record-keeping logs to support the development of a functional and implemented farm food safety plan. Again, in Stephanie's presentation, she said, not every farmer is going to need an audit, but for the growers that do need audits, they need to have a documented plan so that they can pass that audit to get into those markets. And so we're very aware of the need to meet market demand.
Betsy, I'm just going to interrupt you for a quick second here. We're having a little bit of audio issues with your voice going in and out again. So I know there was a little button that you pushed before that seemed to help, and I don't know if maybe you can do that again just so everybody can hear.
It's already pushed.
Okay.
But, is this better? Here, I'll try it. Is this better?
That sounds good. Yes. Thanks.
So we'll see. Do interrupt me again if I'm breaking in and out. And I'll try to slow down since I talk very fast. In terms of the decision tree and when we set out to design it, what we were hoping to do is get a basic set of questions that all growers could answer yes or no to, so they could move through the tree easily, answering yes, I do this, no, I don't do this, to try and figure out what the risks are. There had to be a clear flow so you knew where to go next, and we wanted science-based information to help guide the modification of practices. So we don't want them doing things that don't make a difference. We don't want them spending time on things that don't make a difference. And that's a really important thing because time is so valuable to our farmers, particularly our small farmers where it's a one farmer operation or a couple operations. So that's very important. So this one I love. I have to credit my colleague Annette for finding it. Are you happy? This is sort of what we were hoping it would look like. You know, yes, no, the arrows are very clear. This is what you do. Unfortunately, this is one of our ugly first attempts at coming up with a decision tree that worked. And I put this in there for humor value, but this was honestly one of our first attempts. So, and we didn't stop there. This particular slide had 4 different trees that we went through as possibilities for how to do this effectively. So there was a lot of development and discussion trying to figure out the best way to communicate very complex produce safety issues, but make them simple so that you could move through it. And I would say very luckily we have an advisory group. Without the advisory group, we may still be developing more and more trees. But our advisory group is composed of growers who operate very different size operations from 3 different states, as well as research scientists, extension specialists, and government personnel. So we tried to get a very diverse advisory group to be able to comment on not only the science, but is what we're doing going to work on individual farms? and small farms, medium-sized farms, large farms. So we had really representation from across the board, and then regional representation from Minnesota, New York, and Tennessee. When we took our first 5 trees to our advisory group and asked them, you know, which one do you like? I personally was hoping we would get a winner. Turns out we didn't get a winner. What did happen was they pointed out what was valuable in each of the particular trees, what they liked, and they also suggested that we needed additional parts. And so what we ended up with when we thought we were designing just a tree is we ended up with what we're calling the decision tree portfolio. So it goes beyond the tree to have all of these other parts that the farmers thought would be really necessary to make it a functional piece for them to use. First, they requested a master risk checklist. So in a very quick look, point out the things that could be very high risk. Point out the things that maybe aren't as big of a deal, and then tell me the things that I maybe don't need to look at first. So we do have a master checklist, and I'm going to show you an example. We're still finalizing it, but I'll show you where we're at. Then with the trees, they thought it would be helpful to have an overview. So a one-page that describes why is the use of water on a farm important? What should I be concerned about with manure? Why is training my workers? Just a short overview. So we have an overview of each topic. Then there's the decision tree that moves them through that yes-no decision tree that I was talking about at the very beginning. They also needed food safety template language. So if I'm making a food safety plan and I do these things that we define in the tree, how would I write that down? And this, again, comes back to why the second day of the training that Stephanie talked about is valuable, because even if growers know what they're doing, when it comes to writing it, it is very difficult to figure out what maybe an auditor would like to see in terms of how do you express what you do with your surface water? How do you express what you do with your manure? So all of those things become important. Next, we are supplying them with sample standard operating procedures, because many people have never written a standard operating procedure and they don't know what one would look like. So they were asking for samples of those to help move through that process. Of course, the sample log sheets that I referred to earlier, and then references for additional resources. Okay, Celeste, am I coming through okay, just as a check?
Sounds pretty good. Thank you.
Thanks. So I don't know if you all can see this here. I'll expand to full screen just so everybody can see it. This is our master checklist that we're currently working on finalizing. And you can see here what we're trying to get at with this first one is you use water to irrigate, frost protect, cool, apply sprays during the production of produce. If you're doing this, and this happens to be a surface water source, this becomes a very, very important topic. And so it shows up in the red. And this is how we're moving through getting to this master checklist. We have, after the master checklist, there will be 10 distinct decision tree portfolios that deal with each of the areas that we think are very important. And here you can see them. Worker health and hygiene, wildlife and animal management. These should start to sound familiar because Gretchen went over the pieces of the produce or the proposed produce safety rule, and we have many of the same areas. We do have additional ones, but you'll notice a very significant overlap. So biological soil amendments, non-biological soil amendments, sanitation practices, agricultural water for production, agricultural water for post-harvest use, previous and adjacent land use, transportation, and traceability. All of those are very important, and we'll have trees for each of them. Here is a sample of what the production overview looks like. So this one's for agricultural water, or an overview from one of the trees. And you can see it's sort of very simple written. It's a single page, usually sometimes a page and a half, but tries to lay out very clearly why ag water for production is important. And again, each section has an overview. So there would be one for manure, one for worker training. Here is the worker health, hygiene, and training tree example. So you can see the first question, do you hire any workers? Now, if the answer is no, it turns out that you're the only person working on that farm. And we do provide language for a food safety plan if you're the only person. But if you're not the only person, you follow the yes button down to the next one. And it talks about what training have your workers received. And you can see in the bullet points here, we include what are the important topics that all your workers need to be trained on. And these are just examples to show you what we're doing. You can see this next slide is the template language. So we would give them how to assess their risks and then the actions that they're doing. And you can see in the brackets here that we can point out, here, let me see if I can do this here. We can point out where you need to add information that's specific to your farm. Okay, so you have bracketed information in here, so you can say this is where you need to add information. All right. We also have the sample SOPs, as I was talking about, that talk about the purpose, the scope, the responsibility, and helping people understand what an SOP should look like. Here you can see a sample log. Not only do we provide the sample log, but we also provide a, a section to show them. We fill it in once for them, so they can, I'm getting a little crazy with my highlighter here, so they can see what it should look like when they fill out the form. Okay, sorry, my annotation's not very good. All right. So in terms of the outreach we're doing, and I do want to bring this up because there's going to be an opportunity in New York to participate. We do plan on nationwide train the trainer workshops for ag extension educators throughout the country. We are having one in New York, and that one will be associated with the CCE Agriculture and Food Systems In-Service. Our time slot, for any of you that have looked at the calendar, is the very last session on the very last day. And I think the time is actually 3:30 to 5. Someone just sent me an email, so that might be off by half an hour. But we would love it if you have interest in learning more about this, if you would come to that session, because we can work you through the whole process, show you how to use it, how you can incorporate it, and share all that information with you. We also plan to do workshops with fruit and vegetable growers, particularly small to medium scale growers, which is who this tool was specifically designed for. I do want to give special thanks to the USDA National Integrated Food Safety Initiative for the funding, certainly to our advisory group for the insights and dedication to this project, because they really have helped to refine what we're doing and help us include the pieces that they thought were important. And of course, to the farmers who have shared their advice, their farms, and their experiences. We always learn when growers invite us out to their farms or tell us the problems they're having, because it allows us to create educational materials that address the problems they're having. And if you have any questions, I did put my email, Gretchen's email, and of course, Michelle Sherman, the collaborator from Minnesota, and Annette Wozlacki, who is our collaborator from Tennessee, up there as well. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, or I see there's a poll open on the side. If you guys would please respond to the poll. There are 3 polling questions for this section, so if we get back to them, we can maybe answer the other ones.
Okay. Hey, Betsy, well, folks are participating in this one, and I may have, am I in poll 4 instead of poll 3? Is that what happened?
I think so, but that's okay.
It could be. Okay. Sorry about that. You know, obviously, these are complex issues. There's a lot of great resources that you've put together. Is the Produce Safety Alliance, so your website, is that where folks would find all of the resources that you have shown?
Well, the decision tree is not up yet. It will be shared through the Produce Safety Alliance as well as the National GAPS Program website when it's complete. But because we just haven't finished it quite yet, we haven't rolled it out. The training in New York will be the first one, but then there's training in December in Tennessee. There's another one in January in Georgia. So we're starting to roll it out at that point.
Okay, and I was behind the scenes. Somebody had asked about any public value statements or impact statements that you may have for the work that you're doing. And I know that I've seen a really fantastic impact statement, Betsy, that you've put together. I'm not sure, is that also on your website?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, I'll run it by you first, and if it's okay to share it, it's something that Helene Dillard actually uses quite a bit as she's going out and talking to folks about the, you know, the opportunities or the things that are happening where we're integrating research and extension, and certainly the, you know, the programs that you're doing fit that model very well. So I'll run that by you first, but if it's okay, we may share that with folks as well.
Yeah, I do know that they've done we've created some public impact statements specifically about the programs Stephanie talked about, our in-state training that we're doing with the farmers, and we have shared that widely with our colleagues around the country as well, because the evals from that have been so good, and the growers really feel like it's getting them where they need to be. And just to reiterate what Stephanie mentioned, it really is a truly collaborative project that has allowed the Department of Ag and Markets, the auditors, to lower the growers' anxiety about having an audit by being at those trainings and talking about what an audit is like, by working with the county and regional people, again, Craig and Robert, who really drove my participation by getting funding, by calling and collaborating, by stressing that, as well as people like Chuck Born, who, you know, when I was telling him we need to write, came up with the idea of the computer. So it really has been a very large collaborative project.
Absolutely, and it's really, I mean, there's needs on every angle, and it's, you know, you can see what a value it is to both farmers, and it, you know, works on every angle of this. So we probably have time for one more poll. I posted the results of if folks are interested in staying in the last section. Of those that answered, it looked like 9 were, and I think that's great, since not everybody on the call is even going to probably come to the Ag and Service. So so that's good news for you. We probably have time for one more poll. Do you want to do the poll on decision trees, or the one asking what would make folks more likely to stay for the in-service?
Either one is fine. I just say for the group, and so people can email me, we are willing to try and make attending the in-service as handy as possible. So we kind of want to know, again, we're the last session, and we realize that attendance the last session is oftentimes really low. So essentially, we're trying to figure out what would make our session more appealing, whether people need travel support, or whether they're interested in materials or food or snacks, or as I have to give Gretchen the kudos for the joke on the last one, but whatever your bribe is, we're interested in knowing, so that we can make sure we have people there to share the decision tree with.
So the last final poll is open. If folks could take just a moment and respond. Can everybody see that? There we go. All right, I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to share this morning. I think this was terrific, and I want to thank all of the attendees for participating. Oftentimes, participation, people register, and then a few folks attend or watch and listen in together with a couple folks in the county. I think that's really a nice way of collaboratively learning and then sharing and figuring out what may work or what might not work, and being able to have that information to influence others within the county. So thank you all for every angle of this.
Yeah, and I would just like to have one more shout out to those regarding the commenting on the rule. Just because that is so time sensitive, if you have any questions about if you should be commenting, how to work with growers, to encourage them to comment, please do contact Gretchen or I, and we will try and walk you through that as best we can. The real importance is that right now it's a proposed rule, and there are things in there that will have an impact on our farmers. And so if you work with fresh produce growers, I really would encourage you to look over the rule, submit comments to the rule on the areas that you have concern about, because now is the opportunity to influence it. Once it is a final rule, your ability to influence it is not nearly as significant as it is now. So anything we can do from the Produce Safety Alliance side to support you or help you, please do not hesitate to contact us.
Okay. Anybody else want to participate in the poll? I'm going to close it in just a moment here. Looks like we may be done with poll taking. So I'll share those results so that you can see them. And while that's all going on, just want to share the page that probably everybody has registered on is on the CCE staff website. So if you go to staff.cce.cornell.edu, that main page on the bottom is where all the webinars pop up, and the webinars for Campus County Connections events coming up are there. And you probably know if you click on registration, you can register for any and all of them that you may find interesting in one fell swoop. So the whole plan here is just to get you to know a little bit more about the kinds of things where research and extension are integrated and some really good connections are happening. So thanks again, everybody, for participating. And thank you, Betsy and Stephanie and Gretchen, for sharing your time and information with us. As soon as we can, we'll post this webinar as well as the resources so that you may share it with others.
Thank you, Celeste.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.